Are you ready to enhance your spiritual and magical practice while learning about the arcane Gnostic mysteries? Join the redeemed Archon Sabaoth on his fool's journey with the Gnostic Tarot. Learn about the journey of the Gnostic Jesus. Follow Mary Magdalene in her quest for forbidden knowledge. Experience the celestial majesty of Bar Below, the Supreme Mother. Commune with the invisible spirit or the one of the Gnostics. Accompany the Gnostic sage Marcelina as she weaves primordial mysticism. Engage with Marcus the Magician and his coven of Gnostic witches. Experience the fall and liberation of Sophia in the simulation. Also discover the sagas of Abraxas, Simon Magus, Thunder, Valentinus, and more. In the end, see if Sabaoth and Sophia can unite to defeat the Demiurge. The Gnostic Tarot is perfect for divination and gnosis, the knowledge of the heart. Cast alchemical fire upon the world like Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas. Or grasp the mysteries of existence like Mary in the Gnostic Gospels. Happy heresies and welcome to the desert of the real. Welcome to the Virtual Alexandria and welcome to Aeon Byte. My name is Miguel Connor and I am still your Pompatus of Gnosis. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and certainly a happy solstice, which will be the topic today. For those of you watching on video, that is the Gnostic Tarot. It is still discounted until the holidays are over, so get it. Some have asked about one of the decks with Noria, that they don't know much about this Gnostic heroine, and I will be discussing her in our Finding Hermes group and make the case that she's the most remarkable female figure in all of religions and is more dynamic and mercurial than even Sophia or Mary Magdalene. But that's neither here nor there. Very excited to see everybody today. And I hope everybody's having a good Jupiter day. And again, having a great holiday season. So with us, it is always exciting to have the mighty Bernie Taylor, and he will be discussing the reason for the season, and that is the solstice. Bernie, good to see you, and thanks for coming back.
Miguel, thank you, and Moondog as well. We kind of have like a bromance. This is probably about our 7th or 8th episode.
Yeah.
It's all healthy, but we have a thing going. We have a triangle, a tri thing that we can build and create and experience and explore.
Indeed, it's always great. Yeah, I always have a good time, and the audience always has nothing but positive feedback when we are in our bromance. And with us too, we got Moondog Vance. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm the Merry Christmas Moondog. MCM.
There you go. Oh, I see. I get it. I get it.
Yeah,
Well, awesome.
thing with yams.
Well, good to see everybody already in the chat. Yeah, good to see Graham there. Diocles, Christine, hey, how are you doing? Hope everybody's doing great. And yeah, this is an important show. It is, of course, the solstice coming very soon, or those who are listening in audio, it will already be the solstice. As you know, the word solstice means sun standstill, and it is an important holiday across the world, across history, across mythology, when the sun seems to stop, and it's a huge psychic change in the collective consciousness of humanity and maybe even the gods. Of course, in the Christian dispensation, this means that yes, the sun, the days will get longer, which means Christ is rising and there's a brighter sun. In the summer, it's John the Baptist. It's his time in the summer solstice because Jesus is greater. When John the Baptist is celebrated, the days get shorter. But yeah, so an important time. Don't have much housekeeping. As always, please support Aeon Byte, like, subscribe. Ironically, the Virtual Alexandria Academy is 30% off through the holidays. And the code is, yes, you got it, Solstice. I did this like 2 months ago. Seemed like the right code. And of course, you get more than 20, 30 hours of high Gnostic content. I will eventually add Noria. And you do get all 3 Astronosis presentations for free. So get it while you can. Some people have said, well, I want to give it as a gift. So I say, well, just get it and I'll write a nice card, a graphic, a Gnostic graphic. And then we work together and we send it to a family member. If you want to give it as a code, again, very down home, small business kind of thing, if you know what I mean. So, and yes, great show still coming before the month is over. We will have Charles Fleischenhauer to talk about the Masonic origins of the United States. Whatever you think it was, Charles is going to blow you away with his research. And around New Year's, we're going to have Jason Reza Giordani give us his predictions and discuss his new book on the archetype of Satan. Could it be Satan? Yes, it can, but not your grandmother Satan. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I think that's it. Bernie, tell us about what you've been up to and tell us what we are about to receive for those about to rock.
I think there's some synchronicity going on here because your cover for this episode is of Stonehenge.
Mm-hmm.
And my first slide is of Stonehenge.
I didn't even
Because
know
when
this.
because most people, so I'm going to run the slides,
All
and
right. Let me set
so
them up for you, Bernie. Let's see, where's the all right, here we go.
there we go. The magic.
Yeah. And Vance, if we look too ugly next to this beautiful Stonehenge, take us off. Or if the chat would rather see a bigger screen, I'll let you be the demiurge on this.
We're looking good. Good. So most people do think of Stonehenge for the winter solstice because through the big sarsen stones, the sun sets at the winter solstice. Okay, and that's a story everybody knows. Okay, and the sarsen stones go back to 2400 BCE or so. So they've been around for a very long period of time. The New Grange is a little bit older, 3200 BCE in Ireland. And of course, the Irish are always there first. That St. Brendan, encountered North America first,
right,
is the legend and the lore. So that's at New Grange. And at New Grange, there's an entrance. And above the entrance, there's a window. And in front of the entrance, there's a large stone with these circular type of patterns. It looks like how we could describe it as multiple cyclones meeting at the same time. That's probably, and so there's a window above the door, and in that window at the winter solstice, it's be actually during the daytime because it would take a little time for the sun to rise. The sun does rise, and the light goes through that window, and it goes to the back of the chamber where you have these 3 cyclone type of circles that are almost identical to the ones on the stone in front. And that light shoots through that window and goes to the back, and you can see the light shines onto these three cyclone type of symbols. And I assume that nobody who is listening to this episode has been there, neither have I, during the winter solstice, because I think you have to be Irish, and it's a
Uh-huh.
lottery. So you figure out all the people, and you know, if you're in Boston, you're Irish, and you go to Celtic games, it doesn't count. You have to actually be there. I mean, the Irish, you know,
Yeah,
none of this, St. Patrick's Day Ireland stuff.
yeah.
And so that, of course, that those three cyclone spiral things that match the big stone in the front. Um, and so, but this story is much older than the Irish, although the Irish are very old. The story goes at least to Adam. You know, as we know, Adam, biblical Adam, right, guys? Biblical Adam, because Adam experienced the winter solstice. And he said, "Woe is me, perhaps I've sinned. The world around me is growing darker and darker and is about to return to chaos and confusion." Now, this is after Adam has walked out of the garden, or cast out from the Garden of Eden, right? Because he has clothes on. And in the Garden of Eden, everything was wonderful. So now he's experienced his first winter solstice. He
I
comes
like
on.
they invented cloaks pretty fast.
So I actually had an artist do that. But
Oh,
first,
yeah,
I didn't know when I first worked on this slide, I didn't know if it was before or after he was out of the
right.
Garden of Eden, and so I made him half naked with a log going down from his belly button. Okay,
Yeah, who
and
knows?
then
Well, he didn't have a belly button. What are you talking?
so what he did not have no exactly.
Ooh,
So
never
what I
thought of
did
that.
was I ultimately found out it was after he was cast out, and so I put clothes on. I
Right,
kind
no,
of
it looks
illustrated.
good. I was
It
just
looks
thinking
good, yeah.
about
So when he's and this is a real story. This is I didn't make this stuff up. I mean, this is real. So he goes past the winter solstice, and he realizes that, well, actually the sun goes back in the other direction, and the light grows stronger, and he's happy. He's happy again. And Adam, this is not Bernie, this is Adam, says, "Such is the way of the world." And the following years, he observed both the 8 days preceding and the 8 days following the solstice as days of festivity. And here's a test, Moondog. What are the Jewish people call that now?
Hanukkah.
Well, I actually couldn't find any name for this. I don't believe that's
Ah,
still celebrated, because Hanukkah is a celebration of the deconsecration, or the
darn.
reconsecration of the temple. It is not this solstice holiday. So if anybody out there, if you know what this solstice holiday is, I can't find it anywhere,
Trick
because I would
question.
definitely like to know.
You
what did
got
Huh?
me.
somebody put? Talmud Day? Good
Talmud
pun
Day.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's Talmud Day. So, well,
good one,
that's clever.
Roger.
That's clever. That's clever. So anyway, but it is not Hanukkah. It is that is another day. So this is, and that come it's this comes from a legitimate source. It came from the Talmud Zodah Zog 8a. So I'm not sure if it's still celebrated. And so what Adam was experiencing was, he was sad. He had seasonal affective disorder. Okay. Now I think that the whole word disorder should be thrown out, because everybody has this. I mean,
Right.
everybody has this condition. And that's why I wanted to do this at the end of the year now, because this is sort of the three bros, the bromance, in enlightening the world, right? Bringing back some spirit before Christmas. And so it's called seasonal affective disorder. And the remedy for SAD is to get a light therapy. And you do it for 15 minutes first thing in the morning. You get on Amazon for $39.99. And if you put in the code Solstice, Miguel might not get anything.
I have some of those lamps. I don't get them anymore, but years ago, and the lamps, yeah, they did the
They
job.
do work, yeah.
They do
And a lot
work.
of people go to their doctor around this time of the year. They say, "I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm starting to drink." And the doctor says, "Well, get a light." But it has to be first thing in the morning. It
Yeah.
doesn't help you 2 hours later, because it quickly reduces the melatonin, which making you sad.
Yeah, these
Or
days,
another way
lots
is to
of
go,
vitamin D and meditation does the trick. But yeah,
yeah,
I recommend those lamps if you have
yeah.
seasonal
Another
depression.
way is to go powder skiing in the sun of Utah or Idaho. These and because it just blows the melatonin out of you. It's especially the light bouncing off the snow, the big powder
Mhm.
snow. But it's another way to do it. And it's a these are valid techniques. So I'm going to take you So we've now explained the psychological element of the season of the winter solstice, which Miguel alluded to in the opening. Okay, so we're in sync here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to Columbia River Basin and Gorge, which is where I live in the Pacific Northwest. I live in just outside of Portland, Oregon. And
Beautiful.
when you do, if you ever any out there in podcast land, if you do come this way out to Portland, you definitely have to drop the gorge because it's stunning. It just takes you in. Um, and in the Columbia Basin Gorge, we have Native Americans. We have 4 nations: the Warm Springs, the Yakima, the Nez Perce, and the Umatilla. And in the past, I had friends at all these. I haven't spent much time with the tribes in many years, but I spoke before all of the tribal councils. All of the tribal councils. I
Very cool.
taught at tribal schools, and so they trusted me. I mean, I taught their kids, right, as a guest lecturer, and the Indians thought I was touched. And so for white man's world, that means you're crazy. But among the Indians, to be touched is, it's like a prophet. I'm not a prophet, but they believe that. So in the Columbia River today is a bunch of lakes. In the past, it was a river, like a real river with waterfalls, and one of them was called Salilo Falls. And across from Salilo Falls, or where once was Salilo Falls, because it no longer exists, it's just a big lake. There's a bunch of rock art, and it was called Horseleaf Lake State Park, and a few years ago was changed to Columbia Hills State Park. I like Horseleaf Lake a lot better. And my daughter, we went out there when she was young, and we did a little research, and so there's people on podcast land. There's an image here that has my daughter in front of "She Who Watches," which is the iconic image, and so it's really "They Who Watches," the two of them. And at Horseleaf Lake State Park, which I'll call it, there are many rock art images, and I'm going to describe 2 of them today, and they're actually on the same ledge, and they face in the same direction. And they're one looks like an owl. In fact, it is an owl. Okay, it's an owl, and the other one is a little unknown, and it looks like it has rays coming out from its head, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. And they stand about 4 or 5 foot high. And in front of each one of these, there's actually the slots. The slot in front of one of them looks like it was ground down to make the area to put a pole in, and the other one was definitely just chipped off. Somebody took a big rock and made a placement. And years ago, we're talking back in 2005, I was doing winter solstice research to solve another problem I was working on. And I went out there early in the morning, okay, with the park staff. And one of the guys just happened to be an artilleryman in the Army. So he was a great help. And we put a staff in the slot in front of rock art 2 as the sun rose. As I say, the sun rose over the hills across the river. Okay. And that was 8:35 a.m., whereas astronomical sunrise was 7:30 or so. So which I had no idea how it was going to work this way. So the sun actually had to rise above the horizon, which was the hills across. It actually rises across and into the sort of slot in the hills across. And so the Native Americans, if you knew the winter solstice, you knew where that thing was going to pop up. You could actually determine the winter solstice by the slot in the hills as the sun rose. But while we're waiting for this, we didn't know what time it would actually come over the hills, and we just waited, and we saw that the glow coming up over the hills, and we waited for an hour, and ultimately it happened, the magical moment. And so what happened at that moment in that staff placed in the slot, it created a shadow. And it created a shadow into the viewer's left eye, ran to the viewer's left eye of the owl-like figure. And this viewer's left eye has centrifugal circles. And so what we're looking at, we're right down the center of that view, right down the center of the eye, and of course down to the ground with the shadow as well. And so what probably happened is the Native Americans who did this in the distant past, they were using the centrifugal circles to count to and from the winter solstice. Isn't that clever? Come on, Moondog, that's clever, right?
Absolutely. It's calibrated. Yeah.
It's calibrated. Exactly. It's calibrated. And that's exactly what the artilleryman in the military would have said. Mundo, were you in the artillery or anything like that?
No, no, I got shot at, but I wasn't on the other
I
end of the gun.
And so
Only
this is
kidding.
sort of a magic. This is a magical moment. And by the way, I'm on a ladder I'm on the ladder taking the picture while my artilleryman was holding the staff. And at the same moment, so we took the picture, took 2 or 3 pictures, and then he jumped over to the other one next to it, the rock art, put the staff in the slot, and of course it was through this. The shadow went through the same left eye. Oh, actually the viewer's left eye on the other rock art, and I didn't get a picture of it because I'm in a ladder, right? I'm hovering, that sort of thing. So it was fun, but we took it slow and safe. Okay. Oh, and also that other one, the second one that went through the eyes, has like this rayed halo over it. And so in that case, they would have used the rays on this halo to count to and from the winter solstice. Okay, and clever. Well, if you in rock art in that region, there's a lot of rock art, and there's one of them that is now lost, but it was rubbed years ago, and it has this owl-like figure of a owl-like figure holding a staff. I mean, exactly what we did. I mean, there's no difference. And so it was directions to how to work the rock art. It's directions. And the same owl-like figure has these big eyes, sort of thing. And there's other owl-like characters in the rock art. You can see the ray designs. You can see the eyes, one would be the winter solstice. And throughout that region, there's all kinds of sun ray designs that would have had the same impact that you would have counted to and from the winter solstice. And
See, the owls
so
aren't what they seem, are they?
so no, owls are actually owls are smart. They're really smart.
Yeah.
That's
And
Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Years ago, I spent time with a Native American. His last name is Morning Owl, and he named himself after the rock art because it was the morning owl that woke up to see the solstice and the stars and so on. And so I
Very
had 2
cool.
images. Which one is older? One has lichen all over it, and lichen could be hundreds, it could be thousands, could be 10,000 years old. But it's so my bet is that the one that had the lichen, which is the second one we put the staff on, is older. And how old could it be? We have no idea. Now, this tradition in rock art no longer exists in the Columbia Basin. Okay, it no longer exists. That people using the petroglyphs. Also, I said it's not known that it currently exists. Okay, and so what happened? Well, first of all, how I would also suggest that it wasn't just the lichen, but the first rock art, it was the slot was ground in. Actually, the second one we did, the second that we did, the rock art 2, the slab was broken, and that created the slot. The second one was ground in. Now it's actually equidistant from the slot to the wall, just about 13 inches. So the person who made one copied from the other. They're replicas. They're astronomical replicas, although the style of the images is slightly different. And so the year after, I came back again, and I wanted to test some other rock art there. And then it was snowy, and what I learned from this thing is that many things. One is that you have to look at the weather before you go out there, because if it's snowing, there's no shadow.
Right.
Learned a lot of things, and so the weather has a strong influence on shadow observances. But I also made an observation myself. The day before, I gave a presentation at the local Columbia Basin Museum on another topic, and I just happened to have a laser light pen in my pocket. And what I did was I already knew where the sun was going to rise. So I put the laser light pen on top of my staff that oriented in where the sun would rise, in the opposite direction would hit the wall. So the light would hit the wall from the pen. So Miguel, was that clever?
Yeah, like you're thinking.
And it was lucky.
I'm
It
sure
was completely lucky
you
because I
didn't
had it in
attract
my.
any cats.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Cats jumping on the wall. We have one of those.
Yeah.
And so I used the light pen, and I went around to multiple rock art, and all these eyes lined up with the sun,
Wow.
what the sun would have been by that spot in the rock that came up, or that notch in the rock across the river. And also a reason that, okay, since these things are not really reliable due to the weather, the Native Americans probably had another way to know the winter solstice. Um, and that you just can't arrive for the winter solstice, just like you can't arrive for the winter solstice that's Stonehenge sunset, because you had to plan it in advance. And then these Native Americans in this region, they migrated to the region. Okay. Um, and they migrated to the salmon and other animals. And so it had to be another way to do it. They also recognized that the winter solstice shadow observation is ceremonial. Okay. And it's ceremonial, just the same way Stonehenge. So people say, well, Stonehenge is about the winter solstice sunset and the summer solstice sunrise. Absolutely. But they're not sundials. That's very critical. That's a critical idea. Okay. And so so we've talked about the Columbia Basin. We've talked about the New Grange, and they all have these circles,
Mm.
and the spirals for the New Grange, but they all have this meeting point in the center. And so my bet is that that New Grange one did the same sort of thing, because the sun would have just didn't come up through the winter solstice. It came up for a few days before and a few days after. Okay. So that's my bet on the New Grange. And I do not want to dispute the Irish, because there's wonderful Irish, there's incredible Irish, but I think that there's a little more to the spirals of the New Grange than just the winter solstice. And it probably is a similar tradition dating deeper in prehistory, that we found in Oregon. And which tradition is older? Between New Grange, well, the liking goes back dates 10,000 years, but I don't think this liking was 10,000 years. Was it more than 3,000 years ago? I don't know. I don't know. But it's an idea. Which one is older? You can't really date either of those petroglyphs, the rock art, although you can date the New Grange site. So is this tradition still held? The answer is that when I did this back when, I was told that there was a Native American from a local area, and his name was Walking Stick. And he used to go up, he used to go there, but not the winter solstice. He'd just go there at random, and he said his people made these. And so I don't know, because I never met him. But the tradition changed between the time that it was a rock art and the present. And I mean the present is sort of Indian present. Um, Sligo Falls was once this major center of activity, probably going back from time immemorial, 14,000 years for Native Americans, because the salmon coming up the Columbia River they'd have to stop at the falls, and they'd go around in circles, and people used to put the dip nets in and just pull up the salmon. It wasn't rocket science. Um, and the Chief Tommy Cuny Thompson was the head man. And Chief Tommy Cuny Thompson determined when people would start and when people would stop salmon fishing. And the stop had to do with not just that they have enough salmon, but there'd be salmon to pass upriver to the other tribes. Okay. So he was political. And Tommy Toomey Thompson lived at Old Sligo Village, and every morning before the sun rose, he got up and looked at the stars. And then when the sun rose, he looked at the shadow that came across a bird that he carved that sat on the top of a pole. Um, and he looked into the eastern sky, and we have record of this from a friend of the family who wrote it looks like a children's book, Come to Our Salmon Fest, but in fact, it's an anthropological ethnographic record. And he said, Chief Thompson said, he's waiting to receive a sign from his God, the Almighty. So what he believed in his is that the rising sun, as well as the stars, spoke to him, and that they were the sign. And so it's ceremonial in a sense. And I would say that rock art was ceremonial in the same sort of way. It spoke to him. And then what would happen is that the shadow wouldn't just fall to the ground. The shadow from the bird would fall into the longhouse. And so it's the connection to the longhouse. And as it fell on the floor, created its own sundial. That's clever. Okay. And there's the Sligo village is underwater now, because It's one big lake, right? Okay. And so the Army Corps of Engineers moved the Indians up the slope quite a bit and build them a new Celilo longhouse, village longhouse. And what's very interesting about it is that there is a celestial window on the eastern end.
Mhm.
And during ceremonies, they would take the window off, and so that the bird that on top of the pole, the shadow would cast in as well. That bird on the pole is still there, but the bird is not on top of the pole. It was there until about 7 or 8 years ago, and I remember whenever I pass by there, I drop in to see, see what's going on. And then the Indians would come out and they're like, "What are you doing here?" Both ways. And one day I saw the bird's not on top of the pole, and I said, "Where's the bird?" And they said, "Well, it fell off." And Tommy Cuny Thompson was not the most popular person. Okay, he was an autocratic. He had an autocratic religion. It was his way or the highway. And so there were many people that liked him or were forced to like him, and there are many people that didn't like him. And I have an Indian friend who's now deceased, and he said that, Tommy Thompson did not want the dams to flood his world. Really would happen. And so the Indians voted whether they're going to do this or not. And my friend, who's now deceased, he said that Tommy Thompson put out hitmen on his uncle. Okay, so this is the real deal. This is
Whoa.
serious stuff. Okay, and now this
Was that
concept
the
going out
was that the original was that the original pole, or was that a substitute pole they built after they flooded the lake?
I don't know if it's the original pole, but that's the original bird. So Tommy Thompson
Ah,
carved that when he was in his teens. It was absolutely the same bird.
I
And
see.
so we find these traditions, and Native Americans are still using that shadow that casts on the pole through that window to determine times of ceremony. Okay. So we have this tradition that started as that we have evidence of in the rock art, then moved to the Solilo village.
Yeah.
Okay. And this concept is not unique to the Columbia River Gorge. The Thompson Indians of British Columbia, which now have a new name like Nakiak, I don't remember it. The Thompson Indians go 1900. The oldest member of the family would go out and before the break of dawn and pray to the dawn, the same as Tommy Cuny Thompson. So what probably happened is that the Thompson theology came through the Columbia River Gorge, swept the Columbia River Gorge. Tommy Thompson picks it up, and it washed away the rock art from the past. Most likely would happen. But we don't know because all these people are now, they've left us. Okay. So there was years ago, when I shared with tribal councils, old man Indians just cried because they're like, "Oh my God, how do we forget this? This is so important stuff." And people came out of the woodwork and they would tell me their stories. And I listened. I listened. And one person told me the story that he would go out before the dawn, and by the stars he'd know, so 10 days hypothetically before the winter solstice, the halakha rising of a star would tell him it was that day. He actually went around the whole year with halakha rises of stars or the first sighting of those stars in the year to determine where he was. So the petroglyph winter solstice observers were probably going off the stars as well, so that they didn't have to worry about the the storms. Okay. So I would say that all winter solstice observances are not sundials. I would say that, just put it out there. They're not sundials, but because they make really crappy sundials. That's what it is. And they're not predictive. But what are predictive are the stars. Okay. And when I said before, Tommy Cuny Thompson, there's an image that's 1957, and it's the Columbia River with very little water before it got flooded. You can see there's a village down at the bottom, because that's when it was flooded. It was flooded in 1957, and then Vice President Richard Nixon, Tricky Dicky, gave the dedication for the Dalles Dam. It's a massive dam, and there's a whole bunch of them in the Columbia River. And there's a fish ladder that has taken the place of Solilo Falls, and one can actually go to inside the dam to see the fish migrating upstream. or actually not migrants, they're migrating through the tubes or sorts, right? And if it's not at the time of the year when the salmon are actually migrating, they run a video so you can
Mm.
see the salmon migrating. Okay. So we've talked about the winter solstice in the UK and Ireland, and we a little bit about in North America where I am, the Pacific Northwest. We're going to go down south. We're going to go down to the Inca, and for the Inca, it's the June solstice is the winter solstice, because the opposite side of the year. And the Incas are people, think of Incas are not that long ago. So the 15th, 16th century CE, in what we now call Bolivia, Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, and Argentina. I think we could describe the Incas as ancient people, but not like really ancient people. Okay. Um, and so when we talk about the seasons of the solstices and the equinoxes, they're opposite on different times of the year. Okay. Or at the same time of the year, I should say. And so the winter solstice is actually I get that one. The winter solstice is in the actually the winter solstice in North America or Northern Hemisphere is December 21st, 22nd, whereas the winter solstice in Peru is June 20th, 22nd of the next year or the previous year. So the June south is the December winter as a concept. So and the winter solstice for the summer solstice is of course in June in North America, and it's just the opposite. It's in December in um, the other part of the world, south part, and the equinoxes are opposite as well. Okay. So we're going to go now we're in Peru, we're at Cusco, and everybody knows about Cusco because you have those rocks that sort of fit together. And there's some question about how they were called. And they have a so-called Festival of the Sun. And it's called the Inti Rami in Cusco. And everybody has seen these sort of images of sorts of people praying and worshiping and all that sort of stuff. Well, at the winter solstice, which is the June solstice in Bolivia in Lake Titicaca area, the sun rises, of course, the winter solstice, and they celebrate. And people have seen this stuff before. And what they do actually, they before that sun rises, they actually look for the Pleiades. It's a thing. It's a thing.
Hmm.
The Pleiades. And these are old traditions that people don't really know the roots of, but the gate of the sun is there in Tiwanaku. Everybody's seen it, doesn't know what it means, but of course there's rays over this gate of the sun, this little sun god person. And Lake Titicaca is very high, and that's very important as part of this conversation for the Inca. It's at 3,800 meters, and so it's at sort of the top of the mountain range. An important concept, and so is Machu Picchu. Again, at the top of the mountain range, and the Machu Picchu goes to about the 15th century CE, which again, if you think about it, it's not that long ago, in time, but it's very high in the mountains. And in Machu Picchu is the Temple of the Sun, and the Temple of the Sun is the Torian Tower. And there's windows in it. And one of the windows is well known for the light comes into this northeastern view window in the Torian Tower at the winter solstice. And it comes through the window and it goes across a sort of big slab that is about half the size of the whole space. And it lays right across, and people have noticed it. There's no question about it. And you can actually also what comes through is the Pleiades. And if you look in that same direction through that hole, you can see the Pleiades. But actually it's Taurus. It's actually Pleiades in the constellation Taurus, but they didn't see Taurus. They saw the Pleiades. And we can turn back time. We can look at 500 years ago. It doesn't make any difference with Starry Night Pro, an astronomical program, and we can look in that same direction and we can see where the Pleiades would come and roughly through that window. So if you look through the window, you'd have seen the Pleiades rise just before the sunrise on that day. And the Pleiades in the constellation Taurus, but the image would have been different from where we see it because it's upside down in the southern hemisphere. But it was that's definitely where they were looking. They were looking at in the morning, and so the Pleiades is a star cluster, not a constellation. Okay, and people who Pleiades is a pretty big deal in agriculture in Peru, especially for the potato. Okay, and there was research done or published back in about 2000, and they looked at the forecasting of the rain relative to crops and El Niños, as well as the Pleiades. And this was published. One was published in Nature, and the other was published in American Scientist. Um, and what they found is in their study, which was it's not a discovery because the indigenous people was always doing this, is that during a normal year, the winds travel from east to west, and the winds would push the rain right up into the mountains, the Andes, push it right up to the mountains, and so there would be abundant rainfall early in the year. Okay, and when in a year relative to their June solstice. And what they did was how they could predict this or recognize that the rain was going to happen is they would look for the Pleiades. And if they saw the 11 main stars in the Pleiades observed in June, winter solstice, abundant rainfalls followed, accompanied by a good harvest. So this is Inca knowledge. So this is not white man's discovery. And they call this a normal year. Okay. Whereas in a El Nino year, the the South Pacific warms up, and it sends the weather or the clouds and the winds from west to east, the opposite of the normal year, west to east. And when those clouds come over the Andes, they push these high clouds. They push down the rain clouds. So the rain clouds, it's more difficult for them to get up into the Andes, and so there's less rainfall. And so how they sort of predict this is when they see the five dimmest stars amassed in the Pleiades, that's an El Nino year. Okay, and there'll be a poor harvest. They can plan on that. And what they'll do is they'll move out the potato planting, which has a shallow root, by a few weeks to make sure that there is some water for when it happens. But it's never a good year. Okay. And so the winter solstice light coming into the northeastern window of the Torreon Tower at Machu Picchu is how they predict it from Machu Picchu. It's also how they from Cusco area. That's also how they went high into the mountains and they predicted the Pleiades. So this just wasn't in the Machu Picchu. This was all across the Andes among the Inca people. Okay. And so the conclusions of the study of Nature and American Scientists were that to minimize the impact, they moved it out planting 4 to 6 weeks to wait for the rain as best they could to survive the drought. And they still do this. So this is indigenous knowledge. And the El Nino it's called the El Nino Southern Oscillation. It's a worldwide phenomenon. And when there's one the cycle is usually two years about El Nino. You have a flatten out year, then you have a cooler year. And so, but when you have a double El Nino, which is 4 to 5 years in a row, you have worldwide droughts and things like that. Okay. So when did we lose our touch with the heavens? When did the night sky? Of course, Miguel and the Moondog have not lost it, but most people have. Why don't we, ceremonial, except for a few, go to Stonehenge anymore, or go to Newgrange? The people get the lottery, the Irish, and why nobody goes to Machu Picchu to see I'd say my understanding, nobody goes to Machu Picchu, the Torreon Tower, to see the Pleiades anymore. They hang out at the big party places,
Right.
and so where you can actually take tours, and you go online, you can Google it. And so when was it lost? Well, we can pretty much blame everything on the Romans, okay? Because the Romans were really they systematized things that everything was the same across all the countries that they conquered. And they ditched the calendars of people going out to look at the moon, looking at the winter solstice, all this sort of stuff, and they created mathematical ways of solving these problems that um, everybody could just look at a piece of paper and didn't need the night sky. And we can go Roman calendars back, BCE. Um, and but we do have these holidays in the movies. We still have these traditions. The Christmas is December 25th, and the winter solstice. Now, the winter solstice, December 25th in Roman calendar was the winter solstice. Aha! So people
Mhm.
think, oh, well, it's a different days. We're not
Right.
pagans, we're not heathens. What the whole thing? December 25th on the Roman calendar was the winter solstice. We've changed the calendar. Okay. And so that is I mean, so what we really need to do is we need to reassign Christmas back to what it really astronomically was, which is the winter solstice.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, we got to work on that one, right, guys? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but
of
there'd be
course, as
less
Miguel,
Christmas shopping days, though. We'd lose a few days
that's
Christmas
right. Yeah.
shop.
And of course, the St. John the Baptist, as Miguel said earlier, is on the flip side of time at the June solstice, which is now June 24th. June 24th was the Roman summer
Right.
solstice. Okay, okay, and so this is all starting to make sense now, right?
Right.
So the Romans just systematize it, and Easter, of course, is the first Sunday that succeeds the first full moon after the vernal equinox. So we have three big days in the Christian year. Maybe the three biggest days are tied to the equinoxes. I'm sorry, an equinox and two solstices. Okay, so we've lost the observation, but the celestial observation, but we keep the traditions. Okay. So where did this so for the Romans, hang on a second, sorry. The Sol Invictus, the invincible sun or unconquered sun, was the day, or was the person for the day of the winter solstice. It was the invisible sun. Make all makes sense. Okay. And of course that on that day, other people were, Jupiter, Mars, Apollo, Hercules, and others were celebrated at the same time by different peoples in the Roman Empire. Because you and and it was, let's say, made prominent or sought to be brought back as the key day by the Emperor Aurelian. And he, in his perspective, that there need to be one religion. And he said, Sol Invictus is the perfect one to have. Um, but he basically declared that in 274 CE and died a year later.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it just didn't work out. But had he lived longer, we would not be celebrating Christmas. We would be celebrating Sol Invictus of the
Mhm.
Invincible Sun. Um, and under Saint Peter's Basilica, there's a mosaic of Sol Invictus.
Mhm.
Um, and so St. Peter's Basilica is in the Vatican it's under the Vatican necropolis. So there's a mosaic I'm not sure if it's the wall or the floor, but one can see these distant roots where we're all connected. And so that's heresy, guys. If you need to you need to cut that one out. The foundation of the Vatican is Sol Invictus.
Mhm.
Okay, and so it's the Dies Natales Solis Invicti, which meant this invincible sun's birthday. Okay, so is it just happenstance that these two are on the same day of the year? Well, there was a Christian treatise attributed to John Chrysostom um, in the early 4th century CE, and he said, mark my words, our Lord too is born in the month of December, the 8th before the calendars of January of December 25th. But they call it the birthday of the unconquered. So the Christians at that time recognized that their birthday, Jesus's birthday, was the same as the Sol Invictus. They recognize it the same day, and it just happens to be on the same day. Nothing happens by accident,
No.
and think there was a movie, someone said this line, nothing happens by accident. And there are no accidents. Okay. So if it was Emperor Aurelian's decision for eternity, Sol Invictus would have outweighed the cult of Mithras and Christianity. And the cult of Mithras was sort of the religion of the military. Okay. But he only, he had a year to figure this out. And in his place became Emperor Constantine. And Constantine said it's Christmas. We're going with the Christians. And
he was
so,
a fan of Mariah Carey, so he was just going to go for Christmas.
Christmas, yeah. And so Christmas outweighed Sol Invicti, or Dies Natalis Sol Invicti. And that's why we call Christmas Christmas and not Dies Natalis Sol Invicti. And I'd actually be okay with the Feast of the Unconquered Sun, all these sort of things. I would have been just happy with that. That
How
is.
would you greet people? Merry Feast of the Unconquered Sun.
Yeah, or we'd have to find something. I mean, what are the we know we go to the Coliseum and have a gladiator fight or something like that, and you do the thumbs up or do the thumbs down and all that sort of stuff, right? Okay. Actually, put your fist up and then you go up or you go down and the crowd scream. And so our calendar, which moved it from the 21st to the 25th for winter solstice, happened under Pope Gregory, and so-called the Gregorian calendar, and that changed the story. I mean, for eternity, we now celebrate Christmas instead of Sol Invictus. Okay, so that was we had a good, I don't know, probably about 40 minutes in there that we dove deep. We found our roots. We bonded. We bromanced, and the Moondog is just ready to answer a question or make a comment or just say the hell with Christmas.
Oh no! It gets harder though to find presents for people every year. It gets harder.
Yeah. But, you're gonna have to buy him a gladiator fight or something.
Yeah, maybe if we change the Sol Invictus, I could give people suntan lotion for Christmas, for Sol Invictus.
Yeah, or chariot.
Or actually a light for their seasonal.
Yes.
For the light to. It's kind of interesting, this narrative that Adam. I mean, we actually have Adam in the story being depressed. So of course, indigenous people around the world, of course, Adam, the people who found the narrative of Adam, they recognized that when there was less light, people didn't, depressed, and it's a thing. It's and so you got to, if you don't get a bunch of good light, you sugar up. You have some parties, you throw in the Christmas lights.
Yeah, Adam was still mad at Eve, for getting them evicted. She didn't pay the rent,
So I didn't see her in the story, and that's why I thought it was because before they met. But then,
right,
it couldn't happen when he was in the Garden of Eden because everything was fat and happy. So he goes out into the world, and one of the first things he finds out is that the sun isn't always in the right position all day long, and it does. The nights get longer, and people get sad. Except on AM Bite Gnostic Radio,
where we're always happy. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Do you have a question for Bernie Vance, or what's on your mind?
Not in particular. Graham wanted to know earlier on, is there a specific meaning to the number of turns on the spirals? And I think you did answer that as far as the tracking the sun, but what else can we say about the number of turns on those spirals? You know anything more about how the details worked?
Well, we talk about a few different ones. We talk about the Newgrange ones as well as in the Columbia River Gorge and on the rock art. Now, my perspective is that they were they were charting time through the lines within the spirals. But was there numerology? Of course, there was some sort of numerology that they had that I just don't know I don't know what it is. But clearly, they just didn't. I mean, they could have had 3 spirals, they could have had 20 spirals, they could have had 5 raised to 100 raised. They chose specific numbers. And of course, those numbers were counted for days, but there was probably something else, and that is beyond my what I can't
Okay.
see. I'm touched, but I don't see that far. At least
You
the
know what
native
else?
Indians.
I was also wondering, in your exposure to the Native Americans up in the area that you were, um, what was um, what was their connection between the solstice and their particular religions?
Good
Um,
question. Interesting question. So I was never a member of the tribe. I was never really told in like the inner circles of families and things like that. But
uh,
people, they share with me, and they invite me to parties. I was invited just for salmon ceremonies. I was invited to winter solstice ceremonies, and because I was, I'm just not a fun guy, but I have some sort of vision. Right?
oh,
Okay, and then one day, so I did go to one. I remember one winter solstice party, and I asked if this another tribal member was there, and this tribal member was on the tribal council, and the person said no. Um, her family celebrated the winter solstice yesterday.
Mm.
mm,
Interesting, right? Very interesting. And I said, "Well, do you know how they celebrate the winter solstice?" And she said, as my friend said to me that who's now deceased, he said that they had a ceremony that they walked up to a mountain with a stick and a bunch of rocks. So the rocks were on the ground. So they had some sort of a sundial type of thing. I don't know if that was the rock art. I don't think it was the rock art. I don't, but it was. They had some sort of device that they were connecting with the sun in the same way Tommy Thompson was the bird on the stick, right? And so there's really why would you have everybody's looking at the calendar? You know when the winter solstice is, right? So they had another way of determining the winter solstice, and and I don't remember who. I don't now. This was 20 years ago. I don't remember who 18 years ago. I don't remember who the tribal member was, but she was on the tribal council, and she was like she was the head of her own, or leader of her own religious group, because there are many religious groups within these tribes.
oh,
So that is it's an interesting story because the entire everybody was out there for the winter solstice celebration. It was the big party, right? Just like down in Cusco,
sure.
in Tiwanaku.
Christmas parties, you know.
It was the Christmas, but it was they called it the Indian New Year. That's what they called it.
Oh,
They called it the Indian New Year, except for this group and a religion that had their own tradition, and so they had some way of determining that it was the day before.
interesting. It's
And I
like the
don't. I never
Protestants,
asked them.
yeah.
No, not Protestant. Yeah, that's right. But no, Um, so yes, people still have traditions, and they pass down through the families. And it's power, it's knowledge, it's connectedness. It was also not telling white people what you're doing, because whenever you tell white people what you're doing, they come in, they try to pull it out of you. They cut off your hair. They send your kids off to boarding schools. Whatever it is, you're heathens, you're pagans, you're practically friends of Miguel. And so they had don't if the Indians learned anything, don't trust the white guys. Even white guys who come around and say nice things and have some knowledge that is of value to them. And so
Right.
don't tell them everything.
They're worried about cultural appropriation, right?
Not just appropriation, but people sort of not treating them with the respect that they're due.
You know what else? Tommy Thompson, right? The
Mm,
particular wording that he, his God Almighty, did he pick that up from Western
no.
exposure,
So
or is that his
so
own
that would
personal religion?
so
Good
those are
question.
not words that he would have used. Those are the
Ah,
words that the author of the book used. So the
oh,
author of the
okay.
book was translating from his language into English. Good good question though, but it's analogous because except that we don't today look at the sun as it's rising and ask, the great Almighty, you know, um, Yahweh, to tell us what we should do in that day or what's going to happen. We don't do that. We look at the calendar, the Gregorian calendar. And so they believed there was a cause and effect between the rising of the sun and what would happen in the world. In fact, it didn't, not just the sun, but stars and the moon. But in fact, it did, because the migration of the salmon is tied to the moon, and other animals. So it was a cause and effect, their entire world. But you had to understand all these cycles of the animals. Did we ever do my lunar stuff in this program? I don't think we ever
Not
did.
recalling. I don't think so.
No, we never did, because that's where I started more than 20 years ago. And that's what I brought to the tribes. And that's what I spoke to them about, the tribal councils, about the lunar calendars and how it influenced salmon migration. That's what my whole chapter in life, you've come to know me, started with biological clocks of the salmon. And then figuring out how it works statistically, then going to the Indians to see what they knew, because there were questions I hadn't solved. And that's its own. I've done a lot of podcasts on it, and I've done presentations at conferences and wrote papers to publish and two books on it. That's where I started. And then I sort of fell into the astronomy and fell into the mythology and fell into this archaeology, and clouded my head and everybody else's with these other less important issues than the biology and migration of the salmon, birds, and things like that.
Yeah, we have no idea in our society what it was like without clocks, right? Without paper calendars, and now we have cell phones and so forth. It was like that was the way they told time, and that was the way they had calendars, by the stars and the sun and the moon. That was their way of orienting themselves in space time.
Absolutely, the stars especially, because as we learned by this presentation, is you cannot determine the winter solstice by the sun. You just can't do it because the weather is unreliable. And nobody goes out to the Stonehenge for weeks before, looking at how the sun moves through it to determine when they're going to come out for the party in the winter solstice sunset, or the summer solstice sunrise. Nobody does it. They look at the they don't look at the wall calendar. They look at the computer. They look on the internet. When will the summer or winter solstice be this year? And let's have the party. And so what the tribes were doing, the Columbia Basin and the Thompson, they were getting up before the sun, and every morning and they looked at the stars and what the Haleic Horizon, the first sighting of those specific stars, in the same way that people were doing, the Inca were doing.
Mhm.
They were getting up they were getting up before the winter solstice, and they really needed to see what the stars were in the Pleiades, how many they could count, because if they couldn't see the Pleiades, actually, if they couldn't see the Pleiades, it was an El Nino, right? Okay, and so they had to immediately start adjusting their entire agricultural schedule. But if they could see the Pleiades, happy days, because we're going to have a lot of rain, we're going to have it real fast, and potatoes going to do just fine. So I did not make the Machu Picchu winter solstice discovery. Incas have always had it, and other people have written about that. It's a thing. It's out there in the archaeoastronomy world.
I'm confused. Are potatoes indigenous from America, or are they indigenous from Europe? I get confused.
Oh, they're the
different type
potato,
of
the Irish potato. The Irish potato came
yeah.
from the Americas.
Okay, yes.
And the famine, the blight of the potatoes. The problem is they had too few of the same species of potato, or same variety, and so the blight hit them all, because the blight preyed on that variety. Whereas in South America, we saw that image of the woman with the potatoes. In front of her, there was 20 different colors of potatoes. And so by having a greater variety, diversity, you have less susceptibility to blight.
Makes sense. And migration's interesting. I don't know. I read this and I hope it's right, but I heard that all eels in the ocean go and mate in the same place, the Bermuda Triangle. They all travel to this area around the Caribbean and they go and they mate and then they go out. Animals are fascinating sometimes. What does
So
that?
eels are on a lunar clock, and I just don't mean by the tides, but by the their the light darkness of the moon. And they come up the rivers, the ones that do come up rivers, by the moon as well. And
Mm,
so people don't keep their eel traps out all the time. They keep it out at certain phases of the moon when the eels are going to come through. In the same way with historically with salmon, when you could trap salmon with weirs and things like that.
very
That's it.
fascinating.
Someday we will visit our bromance, and we'll do the moon stuff because that was where I started from. That was my core.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, did the Native Americans deal with the planets at all? I mean, we've talked about the sun and the stars, and you mentioned the moon, but what about the planets? Did they pay any attention to the
Venus.
planets?
So Venus is the morning star,
Yeah.
and we find that uh, up and down the west coast, it's in the rock art, and it's like it looks like a sunburst. Okay, and people say, well, that is some like explosion of a star or something like that, and it isn't. It isn't. It's Venus. It's the morning star. So Venus is of course a planet. Did they account for other planets? The Native Americans that I connected with did not, other than Venus. But they knew every freaking star in the night sky because they were counting from one star to the next, the Helioca rising, to determine what time of year it was. And if you're getting up every night, every morning before the dawn, and you know them, then you're golden because you don't. It could rain one day or snow another day, and but you were counting every day, and they would determine all their ceremonies not by the sun and not by the moon, but by the heliocal rising of the stars, which they all named. So they knew every visible star in the night sky. They knew they had a name for it.
Wow.
Wow. Do they have
And
constellations too to help organize them and to remember
so
them?
yeah, so they did have the S. So their constellations was there's Native Americans all there's a lot of Native American tribes, right? So the ones that I connected with, um, their constellations or asterisms were different from ours, but they had roughly the same groupings. Okay, um,
Oh.
and and there's another. Did we do the Lakota on your program?
Yeah, I do
Okay,
remember. Yeah.
we talked about going to the Black Hills, and each natural geological formation represented its own constellation that they saw into the night sky with projection above and below. Um, and that
Oh, yeah.
the last one was Bears Butte Lodge, which is Gemini, and Devil's Tower was now Devil's Tower.
Hmm.
So yes, so the Lakota had they recognized that to the terrestrial plane. I have no knowledge that Native Americans in the Pacific Northwest connected the above and below the geological formations in the same ways the Lakota did, and the same way as people did in Upper Paleolithic Europe, because these geological formations in northern Spain are directly connected with constellations or asterisms that they saw in the night sky. So but yeah, where I live, I don't in the Northwest. I have no knowledge of that, but I do know that people are still getting up before the dawn and they're looking at the night sky, morning night sky, and counting time instead of pulling out their iPhone. And because what happens is, so in the case of the Pleiades, and among the Inca, if you get up before the dawn, you're fully connected. Okay. Um, and you're looking at the determinants of El Nino. How we in modern science, scientific modernity, determine El Nino is we have buoys out at sea. Okay, that's how it's done. And
Really?
we monitor the rising and the lowering of the temperature in the South Pacific. That's how we do it. There is no predictive model that can tell you whether it's going to be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years.
Really?
It doesn't exist. And sometimes you see in the news, oh, we think it's going to be an El Nino year. Actually, you don't know it's an El Nino. And
we recently had an El Nino like last year, I think this, or this is El
I used
Nino.
when I skied, I followed them because it determined the snowfall, but I don't
Oh,
follow
okay.
them. And but in the South Pacific, it's really important, especially in the Andes, because
Right.
you gonna water the potatoes or not. But they're connected to the night sky, and the world around them, and to see things that we don't see.
Fascinating. Yeah, we got to get reconnected to the stars. So, and when did they start their new year? Because, for example, I've voiced here that I hate the fact that the new year starts January 1st. Despise it. For me, the new year starts either the equinox or maybe around the Chinese, but I hate this idea. But how did they celebrate there? Is
So the
it after the
Gregorian
solstice?
calendar sets on New Year on January 1st,
Right, right.
and that
Makes
has to do
no
with
sense.
a calendar device, because because to make sure that everything is in line from 1 year after the next. Okay, that's basically how. So the among the Inca, the New Year is the winter solstice. Okay, well, actually, it's not a New Year per se. We call it a New Year, but it's not really New Year. It's a position in time that determines then the next step.
Their winter solstice, June.
Their June, yeah, their June
Okay,
solstice.
okay,
The June
right.
solstice is not a New Year per se. We could call it a New Year, but the fact is that life's in a circle. The
Alright, alright,
seasons are in a circle, and they didn't see it as a beginning or end, but rather points in time that would restart again.
yeah, because even seasonally, I think here, what, tomorrow is the first official day of winter or the 21st, so still, the 31st makes no sense.
It makes no sense at all.
I understand you wanted to get the months and all that, yeah,
Yeah, it's got to all work out. Yeah, so it's all about administrative control of our lives, but we've lost our connection with the great beyond.
exactly, so
Fun stuff, guys.
oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
you
Oh
can
yeah,
explain this over Christmas dinner, right?
Sol Invicta
absolutely.
goes, we're gonna be with
So
Sol
Invictus,
at our
that it's
families.
that the Romans switched the date. In fact, it's supposed yeah, so it's really Sol Invictus, yeah, or DA's.TV, they Sol Invicti.
They were
Alright,
just
right,
Yeah,
hackers, the Romans. They took everything from the Greeks and they hacked it up, you know.
yeah.
yeah, and everybody else. Oh, well, what are you going to do? Well, everybody, we're getting to the end. If you have any questions, please super chat them as we wrap things up. Of course, there'll be an audio version. It will be on all video platforms. And yeah, I don't really have much else. Bernie, do you want to tell people? I have it already on the show notes. Tell people your website, your book, and everything else you're working on for
Sure.
2025.
So if anybody wants to, my webpage, beforeorion.com, it's one word. And my webpage is the portal to my social media sites. I have dozens of conference videos ranging from 14 minutes to 20 minutes, nutshells of all this sort of stuff. And people can just enjoy. You don't need to buy a book. If you're going to buy a book, you need to buy The Occult Elvis. And that is the book to buy. It's highly recommended. But yeah, my
Good.
webpage has lots of links and videos, and people just dive in, experience the magic.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. He does great stuff. Great stuff for sure. Yeah, nothing on my end. Yeah, definitely support Bernie. Definitely yeah, like, subscribe, share AM Byte. Help out in any way you can. Of course, I do take crypto if you want to help out or any way you can. I certainly appreciate it. It helps keep the lights of the pleroma on. And again, exciting shows. And we'll have Jason Reza Georgiani, a show on Freemasonry. And in January, also great shows. David Block will be back. Jeff Kripal will be joining us to talk about UFOs. Yeah, we're going to have a lot of cool shows. So 2025 will be well, even though I think the year starts in the equinox, but call it 2025 if you want. So yeah, we're at the end. Vance, thanks for keeping us company on this starry journey.
Oh, always a pleasure. Have Bernie here and hang out with you, Miguel, and write your own gospel, make your own New Year.
Yeah, exactly. Sol Invicticus.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And Bernie, yes, it is always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on and giving us your time and your gnosis.
Thank you as well, guys. We'll do it again.
Yes, it certainly will. It will happen again. And for everybody else, yeah, thanks for being there. As always, great comments in the chats. And I hope if we don't talk, I hope everybody has a good Christmas or Sol Inviticus celebration or Solstice celebration, whatever you want to do, or New Year's. Enjoy yourself, enjoy your family, and enjoy the darkness that is coming and the light that comes up. Yes, I would, my advice, check out David Litwa's channel. He has a wonderful Gnostic Christmas video, and he talks about the Gnostics celebrate Christmas. He says, in a way, they do, because Christmas is about the light growing, and it is about the birth of a God in this world. Well, that's what all Gnostics believe, that there is a Christ within us that is supposed to come out. We are to become Christ and grow in our light. That's our purpose in life. So that's the way you can see Christmas as a Gnostic celebration, the birth of the Christ and the Savior within you, and the growing light in the darkness of the year. So, yeah, thank you, David, and thanks everybody else. Take care, everybody. Yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.